The fog was still hanging low over the hedgerows when the first Sherman rolled forward. It was just after dawn on August 8, 1944, near the small French village of Mortagne. The morning air was cold and wet, and the narrow dirt road was barely visible through the mist. Inside the tank, the crew could hear only two things: the steady rumble of the engine and the distant echo of artillery somewhere beyond the hills. Sergeant Daniel Turner, the tank commander, leaned slightly out of the hatch, binoculars in hand.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
He scanned the gray fields ahead. At first, everything looked quiet. Too quiet. Then, through the fog, a dark shape moved. Big, low, and unmistakable. A German Panther tank. For months, American tank crews had heard the same warning again and again. The German Panther was deadly. Its armor was thick. Its long 75-millimeter gun could destroy a Sherman from more than a mile away. Many Allied soldiers believed the Sherman simply could not stand up to it. The stories spread quickly across the front lines: Shermans burning in the fields, crews abandoning tanks after the first hit. The phrase "Ronson lighter" became a cruel joke among soldiers, suggesting the Sherman would ignite with the first strike. But that morning near Mortagne, something had changed. The Sherman rolling through the fog was not the same Sherman that had fought in North Africa 2 years earlier. This one carried a new weapon, a longer, faster gun, the 76-millimeter. Inside the turret, the gunner, Corporal James Wilkins, kept his eye pressed against the sight. The Panther's silhouette grew clearer as the fog shifted. Wilkins knew the reputation of the German tank. Every American tanker did. But he also knew something else now. Their gun had changed the game. The old 75-millimeter Sherman gun was excellent against infantry and light vehicles, but against heavy German armor it struggled. The new 76-millimeter gun was built for something else entirely: armor penetration. Back in the United States, engineers and officers had argued about this change for more than a year. Some commanders believed the original 75-millimeter gun was good enough. It fired a strong, high-explosive shell that worked well against infantry and anti-tank guns. But as the war in Europe intensified in 1943, American intelligence began reporting more sightings of German Panthers and Tigers. These tanks were built for tank combat. Their armor was sloped and thick, and their guns could destroy most Allied vehicles with ease. The Panther first appeared in large numbers during the Battle of Kursk in July 1943. German designers had learned hard lessons from fighting Soviet T-34 tanks. They created a machine that combined sloped armor with a powerful long-barrel gun. The result was a tank that could dominate open ground. When American officers studied captured reports and battlefield photos, many realized the Sherman's current gun would struggle against it. But replacing a tank gun was not simple. Production lines were already running at full speed. Thousands of Shermans were being shipped to Europe every month. Changing the gun meant redesigning the turret, retraining crews, and adjusting ammunition supply. Still, the pressure kept growing. In early 1944, the decision was finally made. A new version of the Sherman would enter combat with the 76-millimeter M1 gun. By June 1944, when Allied forces landed in Normandy during Operation Overlord, a limited number of these upgraded Shermans had begun arriving with armored divisions. Many crews were skeptical at first. The gun looked longer and more powerful, but nobody knew how it would perform against the Panther in real combat. That question would soon be answered. Back near Mortagne, Sergeant Turner lowered his binoculars slowly. The Panther was about 800 yards away and moving across the field from left to right. Turner ducked down into the turret. His voice remained calm, but every crew member could hear the tension beneath it. The Sherman stopped behind a small hedgerow. Wilkins adjusted the gun slightly. The long barrel of the 76 millimeter extended beyond the bushes. The loader, Private Harold Green, lifted a fresh armor-piercing round from the rack. The metal shell was heavy and cold in his hands. Green slid it smoothly into the breech. Outside, the Panther continued moving, unaware that it was already in the crosshairs. "On target," Wilkins said quietly. Turner gave a short nod. "Fire!" The Sherman's turret shook as the 76 millimeter gun roared. A flash burst from the muzzle, followed by a cloud of smoke. The armor-piercing round raced across the field at incredible speed. The shell struck the Panther's side armor with a sharp metallic crack. For a moment, nothing happened. Then smoke began pouring from the German tank's engine deck. Inside the Sherman, the crew stared through the sight. The Panther slowed, then stopped completely. Flames began licking upward from the rear hull. The new gun had done its job. Moments like this began appearing more often during the summer of 1944. As the Allied armies pushed through France after the Normandy breakout, more Shermans with 76 millimeter guns entered the battlefield. Crews quickly learned how to use their new weapon effectively. The 76 millimeter gun fired several types of ammunition, but its armor-piercing rounds were the key to fighting German tanks. The standard armor-piercing shell could penetrate around 109 millimeters of armor at close range under ideal conditions. That meant it could punch through the side armor of a Panther and sometimes even the front under the right angle and distance. Later in the war, an even more powerful round called HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing, was introduced. This ammunition used a tungsten core and traveled at extremely high speed, making it even more effective against heavy armor. But numbers and specifications only tell part of the story. Tank combat was never simply about whose gun was bigger. Terrain, crew training, and tactics often mattered more. In Normandy, the battlefield itself made tank warfare complicated. The region was filled with thick hedgerows, earth banks topped with dense bushes and trees. These hedgerows created narrow corridors where tanks could not see very far ahead. A Panther might be only 50 yards away and still completely hidden. American tank crews quickly adapted. Shermans often moved alongside infantry units. Engineers even welded steel hedgerow cutters onto the front of some tanks. These sharp metal teeth allowed Shermans to break through hedgerows instead of climbing over them, reducing their exposure to enemy fire. Still, encounters with Panthers were dangerous. One such battle took place on July 30, 1944, near the village of Le Désert in Normandy. The U.S. 2nd Armored Division was pushing south after the success of Operation Cobra. German forces were trying to slow the advance using Panthers from the 2nd SS Panzer Division. Lieutenant Charles Roberts commanded a Sherman armed with the new 76 millimeter gun. His platoon moved cautiously along a narrow country road bordered by tall hedges. Visibility was poor. Suddenly, a Panther appeared at the far end of the lane. Both tanks saw each other at almost the same moment. The German gun fired first. The shell slammed into the hedgerow just beside Roberts's tank, spraying dirt and branches across the Sherman's hull. Roberts immediately ordered his driver to reverse while the turret rotated toward the threat. The loader pushed an armor-piercing round into the chamber. The Sherman stopped briefly as the gunner took aim. The 76 millimeter fired. The round struck the Panther's lower front plate. The German tank jerked violently, then began smoking. The crew bailed out seconds later. Moments like this slowly changed the reputation of the Sherman. For years, many people had believed American tanks were simply weaker than German ones. In reality, the Sherman was designed with a different philosophy. American military planners focused heavily on reliability, speed, and ease of production. A Sherman could travel long distances without mechanical failure, something that German tanks often struggled with. The Panther, for example, was powerful but mechanically complex. Early versions suffered from engine fires and transmission failures. During long marches, some Panthers broke down before even reaching the battlefield. The Sherman, on the other hand, was dependable. Crews trusted it to start every morning and keep moving. That reliability allowed American armored units to advance quickly across large areas. Another important advantage was logistics. American industry produced Shermans in enormous numbers. More than 49,000 Sherman tanks were built during the war. Spare parts, fuel, and ammunition could reach the front lines quickly through an efficient supply system. A damaged Sherman could often be repaired and returned to combat within days. German units rarely had that luxury. Panthers that broke down were sometimes abandoned simply because spare parts or recovery vehicles were unavailable. When the 76-millimeter gun entered the picture, the balance shifted even more. American tank crews began learning how to fight Panthers on equal terms. They avoided long-range duels where German guns had the advantage. Instead, Shermans used speed and coordination. Multiple tanks would maneuver together, attacking from different directions and aiming for the sides of enemy vehicles. This tactic proved especially effective during the Battle of Arracourt in September 1944. The battle began on September 18th near the town of Arracourt in northeastern France. The U.S. 4th Armored Division faced a large German counterattack led by the 11th Panzer Division. German commanders hoped to slow the Allied advance toward the German border. Many of the American tanks involved were Shermans equipped with 76-millimeter guns. Dense morning fog covered the battlefield for several days. Visibility sometimes dropped to less than 100 yards. German Panther crews struggled to spot targets in these conditions. American tankers, however, used the fog to their advantage. Small groups of Shermans moved quietly along ridges and tree lines, appearing suddenly at close range before firing. Captain Creighton Abrams, one of the most respected American tank commanders of the war, led his battalion through several of these engagements. Abrams believed strongly in aggressive maneuver. His tanks rarely stayed still for long. During one clash near the village of Arracourt-la-Petite, Abrams's Shermans encountered a column of Panthers moving through the mist. Instead of retreating, Abrams ordered his tanks to split into two groups and flank the German formation. Within minutes, the 76-millimeter guns were firing from both sides. Several Panthers were destroyed before they could even rotate their turrets toward the threat. By the end of the Battle of Arracourt, American forces had destroyed or disabled dozens of German tanks, including many Panthers. The success shocked German commanders. They had expected their superior armor to dominate the battlefield, but war rarely follows expectations. The Sherman with the 76-millimeter gun was not invincible. Its armor was still thinner than that of a Panther. A direct hit from the German 75-millimeter gun could destroy it easily. But the Sherman's advantages, mobility, reliability, and coordinated tactics, allowed it to compete effectively. Tank crews understood this reality better than anyone. Inside every Sherman, 5 men worked together in a tight steel space. The driver sat at the front left, controlling the vehicle. The assistant driver handled the machine gun and radio equipment. In the turret were the commander, gunner, and loader. Each role was critical. The gunner needed steady aim. The loader had to move quickly under pressure. The driver positioned the tank to give the gunner the best possible shot. And the commander watched the battlefield, making decisions that could mean life or death. Life inside a Sherman was hot, loud, and exhausting. During long operations, crews sometimes stayed inside their tanks for more than 12 hours. The metal hull trapped heat during the summer and cold during the winter. The constant vibration of the engine shook the entire vehicle. When the gun fired, the blast was deafening even with helmets and headsets. Yet crews developed a strong bond with their tanks. Many commanders gave their Shermans nicknames painted on the hull. Some tanks carried personal markings or small symbols that reflected the crew's hometown or unit pride. These small details made the machine feel less like a piece of equipment and more like a shared home on the battlefield. As Allied forces pushed deeper into Europe during late 1944, the number of 76mm Shermans increased steadily. Factories in the United States produced thousands of them, and new ammunition types continued improving their effectiveness. Tankers also began receiving HVAP rounds in limited quantities. These shells could penetrate Panther armor even more reliably, especially at shorter distances, but HVAP ammunition was rare. Supplies were limited because tungsten was difficult to obtain during the war. Crews often carried only a few HVAP rounds for emergencies. Even without them, the 76mm gun proved capable when used correctly. During the winter of 1944, the Battle of the Bulge brought some of the most intense tank fighting of the entire war. German forces launched a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest on December 16th. Snow covered the ground. Temperatures dropped well below freezing. Visibility was often poor due to fog and falling snow. American armored units, many equipped with 76mm Shermans, fought desperate defensive battles across Belgium and Luxembourg. One engagement near Bastogne on December 19th involved a small group of Shermans facing advancing Panthers from the German Panzer Lehr division. The American tanks took positions behind a slight ridge overlooking a frozen field. Their commanders knew the Panthers would soon appear. The first German tank emerged through the snow shortly before noon. The Shermans waited until it came within 600 yards. Then the 76mm guns opened fire. Within minutes, several Panthers were burning in the snow. Stories like these rarely made headlines at the time, but they were repeated again and again across the Western Front. Each battle slowly reshaped how soldiers viewed the Sherman. It was not the unstoppable monster that the Panther appeared to be on paper, but it was never meant to be. The Sherman was a practical war machine built for a massive global conflict. It could be produced quickly, repaired easily, and transported across oceans. Most importantly, it allowed Allied armored forces to maintain constant pressure on German defenses. Another quiet advantage of the Sherman was its adaptability. Engineers continuously improved the design throughout the war. Some Shermans were equipped with extra armor plates. Others carried specialized equipment such as mine flails or bridge-laying gear. The same basic chassis could support many different battlefield roles. This flexibility made the Sherman one of the most versatile armored vehicles of the entire war, and when fitted with the 76mm gun, it could fight back against the most feared tanks of the war. By the spring of 1945, as Allied armies crossed the Rhine River and pushed into Germany itself, Sherman crews had gained enormous experience. They understood how to fight Panthers and Tigers using teamwork, speed, and positioning. The long barrel of the 76mm gun had become a familiar sight across the battlefield. In the final months of the war, the myth of the weak Sherman began fading among the men who actually fought inside these tanks. They knew the truth. The Sherman was never just a piece of steel. It was 5 soldiers working together inside a machine that carried them through some of the most dangerous battles of the 20th century. And when that 76mm gun fired across a cold European field, even a Panther had reason to fear it.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.